Hello and welcome to the channel. Today we are looking at the newly added Spaceballs. What we've done here is we've taken the default fighter, we've stripped the weapons off, and just slapped a ton of these Spaceballs all over it in areas where they would be most likely to protrude ahead of the rest of the ship. Now, as you've seen in the actual developer release video, they do tend to bounce off of structures, so the idea here is to use it as a safety buffer on the ship to allow it to basically crash into whatever ship it's trying to dock to. We've done a few experiments so far, as you can see on that one there, and a completely destroyed one I had to remove altogether. We did have some early failures with it. We, of course, expanded the number of Spaceballs and the points of contact to cover areas that they have had issues with in our previous tests. So, what I'm about to do here is I'm going to add one up here for this little fin area, and I'll show you what we did with all the other balls once we add those. Of course, we're using a mirror, so it's going to actually be two. So basically just strip the armor off because you can't add them onto the slope. They do have to connect like any other block. They start with default mass generation on, so we go into the settings and we'll just select them all as a group. We'll turn our virtual mass off altogether. We go into 0 and just disable the broadcasting because they will broadcast by default. So far I've not played around with the friction or restitution options yet. Those I imagine would have some severe effects on how it performs when impacting other obstacles. And of course that we're not wanting to get into just yet here. We just want to do basically a theory practice kind of thing here. So, as you can see, we stripped the weapons off, we've added the Spaceballs all over it, still got the landing gear. I thought about replacing it with just the balls, but of course you'd have no way to anchor it. And what we're going to do is we're doing a few passes on the blue ship, try to bang ourselves around, and get an idea of how effective they are. No, we had nicked the hanger there, so that would have probably taken part of our thrusters off in the original design. You see that would have just crashed us right into the side there. Now that angle right there, that cockpit was hard to cover. So that's kind of a given. But basically take a look here, you'll notice the two forward, I guess we call them arms, where the weapons would be. They should have crashed right into this section here and dug in, but of course those Spaceballs have protected it, so those thrusters rather, are completely protected by that. We did lose the cockpit because it did come in just the right angle to just smash right into it. And of course that caused chain reaction, knocking other parts off. But all the parts that were covered for impact by the Spaceballs, of course, are perfectly fine. So, you have some interesting design concepts you can do there. We'll go ahead and grab another one. So you see what happened is it came in at this angle right here and just sliced right into the cockpit. Alright, so you have some interesting design concepts you can work with here. Obviously what we're doing here, the buffer to avoid collisions, it can work in either way. You could put it on the landing craft, or probably more practically for that, you can actually put it in the hangar bay along the walls there. So you see we're just banging across all kinds of things there. And we'll go back in. You don't see any damage from when we did it just a minute ago. And that again should have caused damage to the blocks. But of course, with these balls, we're not damaging anything. Now I've done this at fairly high speed, and as long as you don't hit one of those magical angles that you haven't covered like we did on that armor section, then you're pretty much good to go, even with the default settings. I imagine once you adjust the restitution settings, and then you'll have a variety of different effects, so you can actually have a strong bounce back. So, what I was getting at is you could line this hangar up with the balls, and that would be a more effective way for buffering the landing itself. Now of course it works just like a mass block as far as its mass generation. Difference is that when you have something being pulled down by it, if the ball hits the surfaces, whatever's below it, you're not going to have to worry about that just breaking apart. It's going to bounce right off. So that will be interesting to play around with on our anchor drone designs. And there is a concept I'm going to test shortly about using it as an armor and see how it handles getting shot at by various different ammo types. And of course, obviously I would have to assume that anything you literally sling at it will bounce off, but we'll test that as well. Alright, stay tuned for the next part of the video. Alright guys, welcome back. We are moving on to our shooting testing, and I, of course, ended up apparently firing rockets off early when I was trying to activate the recorder. So let me get this repaired up here. What we've got here is a wall of spaceballs on a station chassis. Rather. And we are going to test a large rocket launcher on them to start with. Alright, so 4 rounds and then it's gone. With very, very minimal damage to any of the adjacent blocks. So it's not that practical an idea for armor against rockets. Now let's go ahead and place a chain gun here. Obviously we can't count the rounds on this. So it takes about a minute of dedicated fire on one target with one chain gun, and it cuts right through. Of course, at that distance, it's probably going to be a little bit spread. No more extra damage than what the rockets had given us. Now you notice there was not really any bounce back from either of those two. So what we're going to do now, is we are going to try a projectile. And not like a rocket, but actually what has basically become a traditional projectile. We're going to go with a stone set. There is our stone. Go with 10,000 pounds of it. Pick it up. Yep. Of course, I didn't think about it. Obviously you can't throw it if you pick it up, so we will have to manually sling it. Which, bear with me if I screw this up a few times. It's never easy to sling these things. Try it again. Well, let's try a different angle. Yeah, I did not throw that at all. Alrighty, try it again. Let me get closer then, okay? Make it easier. Apparently I would not be a good player in space baseball. There we go. Now that's interesting. That sucker just bounces right off of there. So this pretty much negates all of your player-created weapons that deal with just slinging things rather than actual ammunition. As you saw, that just completely bounced off and rolled down the wall. So you no longer need to worry about making gravity generators when you can do giant walls of spaceballs. But as far as traditional weapons, they work perfectly fine. And in fact, since we have one in blueprints, let's test ramming with a fighter here. We'll try it with balls on it first. Just bounces right off. And then we'll go back to it, take the balls off the front, and see how it handles hitting with armor blocks. Of course, get some distance. And it takes no damage at all, from what I can tell. Yep, no damage. And just bounces off of the wall. So yeah, you're going to have to rely solely on traditional ammunition or early detonation weapons that will detonate close enough, which, actually, let's go ahead and test that. Get our warhead here. And we'll move our little fighter back up after we place a couple warheads. Yeah, that takes it out in the right and neat. Okay, yeah, so use your warheads. You're going to have to park a drone up close and manually detonate a warhead. Imagine a grinder drone might also do the trick, but you're going to have trouble connecting to it. And test that out. We'll try landing gears on it right now. All right. Okay, there is a signal. Okay, so you can land on it. If you don't bounce off, it takes a bit of work, but basically there's no real difference between the effort of landing and just parking next to it. So your trick to get past a wall of these or any armor of these is going to be to use either your traditional weapon systems or your warheads. And of course, if you have your mass accelerator cannons that you've made, you're definitely going to want to try to avoid this, or at least send something in ahead of time to make a hole. Now, I also imagine that based off of these properties, if you were to code a structure in these, just completely box it in, you would end up with any damaged parts that are floating around possibly banging off of these and just shooting back throughout the ship and even gaining momentum. So say you have a hauler that's loaded with these and it's carrying some ore, and somebody manages to roll a warhead up, blow through a hole in your wall, and damage one of your large cargo containers, and all that iron ore that's just stacked up into a big ball just bounces around, and it starts to gain acceleration as it bounces off of one ball onto the next, and it's just ripping through your ship. It's just really going to be a hassle altogether. Apologize for the phone call there. Alright, but that pretty much covers it, and as always, thanks for watching, and have a good day.